Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about my favorite books of 2020. I'm super late with this, but it did take me so long to make this list because I had like 30 some books that I really enjoyed this year, and I wanted to narrow it down to 10. I was not able to rate them, so the only one I know for sure is my favorite book of the year, but all of the other ones are in no particular order. I just couldn't pick a favorite, or I couldn't rate them or rank them. I could just be like, that's my favorite one. Everyone else is tied for second. So first up, we're going to talk about This Is Your Brain on Birth Control by Sarah E. Hill. This book should be required reading. I read this, I think, back in November, and I've recently talked about it, but everyone should read this book. It talks about your hormones. It talks about how birth control fucks with your hormones. It's basically a textbook for everything that they won't tell you about what birth control does to your body and how it affects who you are as a human. I love it, and I think it's changed my life in a lot of ways. I've decided to go off the pill. It's a super personal conversation to have, but I mean, we're in a pandemic. I'm single. I'm not doing anything that's gonna yield a pregnancy, so I went off the birth control pill just to see how it feels, how I feel without it, and compare and contrast. And I wouldn't have done that without this book. I absolutely love this book. I don't understand why more people aren't talking about it. I don't understand why more people aren't reading it, because it talks about hormones. Everyone has hormones, and everyone should know what their hormones do and how, if you fuck with your hormones, what can happen. I loved it. It's a nonfiction book, and I don't know what else to say about it, but it's just so well written. It's not confusing. It's written in a way that you're like, yeah, I get what you're saying there, doc. It was wonderful. I love when she said, in 100 years, when we look back on how we mess with women's bodies, we will be horrified. And I was like, that's crazy. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. Please read it. What's really funny about this list is some of these books I didn't give 5 stars. So what does that mean for me? There were 23 books this year that I gave 5 stars, but yet this book is on this list and I only gave it a 4-star, but it has haunted me. And I believe this is probably going to be somewhat of a controversial opinion because other people, I'm sure, have put this on their worst book of the year list. And I loved it. And it's Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. Like, I loved this. I discovered this year how much I loved dark academia novels. I think a lot of us did. But this book, to me, just like summed up dark academia. And it made me feel so uneasy the whole way through. Like, I started it and I was immediately like, what the fuck is going on? And there's no plot, really. There's just these characters and this weird school where you can't talk or have any contact with the outside world for 3 years. And then all of a sudden you'll like rule the world, kind of. And then they have these like special people who get to go in these labs and do these weird experiments on things that are just crazy. I loved it. And it's like a cult, basically. This whole school's like a cult, but like it's presented in such a way that you're just uneasy. Like, you know these things, like you're reading it and you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. But at the same time, you're like, oh my God, what's gonna happen now? I loved it. I loved it so much. And I just think it was written so perfectly to fit with what it is. And I understand why people don't like it. I totally understand why people don't like it. But at the same time, I don't care at all because I loved it. And I remember I was just like, I don't want to put this down because I need to know if everything's going to be okay or not. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I understand why you wouldn't. But oh my God, did I ever? I love weird shit. It's the other thing I discovered this year. I really discovered how much I love weird shit in books. I feel, okay, so I've also made the caveat that I don't like when a book is pitched as contemporary and then does magical stuff. But I don't think that's really what I mean when I say I like weird shit. I mean, I like books that are pitched as weird as fuck. If you say that to me, I'm like, great. If it's pitched as like totally normal, YA contemporary, and then all of a sudden there's magic, less liking it. It also, I guess, depends on like what you do with the magic and what you do with the rest of your plot, because there were some books this year that I read that did some shit that I was like, no. But I did realize this year that most of the time, if you're doing something really fucking off the rails, love it. Speaking of doing something really fucking off the rails, we have Bunny by Mona Awad. I gave this a 5-star. I cackled. I screamed. I loved this book. It is weird as hell. It is weird as all hell. The things that they do with these bunnies. It's about a woman who is in grad school for creative writing, and she has to workshop weekly with these 3 other women, I believe 3 or 4 other women, and they're all best friends. And they're like obsessed with each other. Like, it's creepy obsessed with each other. And she like kind of hates them, but is also like so interested and intrigued by them. And she gets sucked into their little group, and she sees what they do, and she sees who they are, and it's so fucking weird. It's so fucking weird. And I loved it so much. I don't know how to tell you that you should read this book, but only if you like dark, weird shit. If you don't like stuff like that, don't read it. Don't read it. Oh, it was blurred by Lena Dunham. That was a choice, but please. It was so good. I don't even know how to like talk about it, because the twists in this, the things that fucking happen in this book, I have told people in my life that they need to read it just so I had someone to talk about it with, because there's one scene in particular that I'm like, I need to talk to someone about what this means, but I can't because no one I know has read it. And I'm like, everyone should have read this. Why haven't you read this? So good. So this is a book I went into very prepared to not like, and that's Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I gave this a 5-star because I fucking loved it. This is the weird shit I signed up for. I understand other people's misgivings about this. I understand why people don't like the ending. I get it. I understand why some people are like, why was some of it happening? It didn't make sense. Some of the plot points didn't make sense. I still loved it. I loved it so much. I was so enthralled, and it had me completely just like in it. I was gripped. I was done. I was ready for anything. I was done. I was ready for everything that Rory Power was gonna throw at me. This is body horror. You've probably heard. It's about a girls' school on an island off of Maine. They have now had this tox take over their bodies and done weird shit to their bodies. If you're not dead, you're like a half mutant animal thing, and I loved it so much. I just, oh my god, I don't even know what else to say, because I feel like everyone has discussed this book, and you either fall between like, I loved this, or I fucking hated this, and I loved it. I've made other people read this. They've understood. My friend Sydney was like, I want them to make something out of this. And I was like, yes, it needs to be a TV show. It needs to be a movie. It needs to be something. They have this new show called Wild on something. And I was watching the commercial, and for a split second, I was like, wait, what? And then I'm like, oh, never mind. Because this would be great TV. It would be great TV. Next up, we have something from one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This year I finished up his canon, and I read this and Final Girls. Final Girls is probably one of my least favorites. I've said this before, this and The Last Time I Lied are probably tied for first place, and then Lock Every Door and Final Girls are like tied for second, because I loved all of them, but I would say this one and The Last Time I Lied really, really just like blew me away. I love this so much. It is about our main character, Maggie, who, when she was little, lived in a haunted house. Her father has written a book about how they escaped in the middle of the night from this house, and she has grown up believing it was a lie, and that, you know, she wasn't actually haunted. Her dad made it all up to make money. But then her dad dies, and she's left the house, and she is gonna go back. She just happens to be a real estate agent or an interior designer or something. I don't know. She like flips houses, and she just happens to do that. She's gonna do that to this house and sell it. And her mom's like, don't go back there. And everybody's like, why? I didn't see the last like little bit of this book coming at all. I had predictions, but like, you are taken on a fucking ride. Like, Riley Sager just goes for it, and I love it. This is such a ride. This is a ride. I don't even know how to describe it. I just was like gripped. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then like the last little bit, you're just like, well, I would never have predicted that. Because like, you can predict elements of the story, probably. Most likely you can predict parts. Like, there were moments where I was like, I think I know what's going on. And I would text my friend and she'd be like, do you? And then at the end I was like, okay, I predicted like an eighth of the reveal. My thing with thrillers, man, you entertain me, you surprise me. You don't even have to surprise me. As long as you entertain me, I'm fine. But like if you can surprise me too, gold. Next up, we have another book that I really thought I wasn't gonna like, and this is Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. I read a lot of these because they are books in Lala's. They were in like some of her favorite books, and for a video I did for that, and a lot of them have just become some of my favorite books of all time because they're great. All the weird shit I get from Kayla. But Middle Game, I truly thought I wasn't gonna like. I'm not into like sci-fi kind of stuff. I'm not into what this book was pitched to me as. It was great. It was so good. It's about Roger and Dodger, set of twins. You've probably heard because everyone's heard. And they've been separated since birth because they're like special. But they can hear each other in their brains. They've never met, but they can hear each other. And they keep getting brought together even though there's many people trying to keep them apart for different reasons. And they were, you know, they were created in a lab and just, oh, you learn about them and I love it. And I think there's going to be a second one, which is going to be very interesting. I loved it. I loved Seanan McGuire's writing. I loved everything. The plot, the twists, the characters. I loved it so much. I probably should get myself a copy of it because I do want to reread it really badly. But, oh, it was so good. It was so good. Next up, we have The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I read this actually for grad school, and it was so striking to me because I had never read a novel in verse before, and I really thought I was going to hate it. And then I read it, and I was like, this was so beautiful and so well done, and I'm obsessed with it. It is about a girl who comes from a really religious family, and she's really not allowed to do much. She has a twin brother who's like the star of the family, but she's kind of seen as like the rebel, and she's gonna go do things whatever she wants to do, and she's not gonna listen to her parents. But she joins the poetry club at her school, and her teacher's like, yes, you should read this, you should go to a poetry reading, you should, you know, display your poetry. But like her mother doesn't really want her to do any of that. And I loved it. The relationship between our main character and her mother is just so complex, but like really real, and just the depth involved there. It was beautiful. I gave it a 5-star. I loved it a lot. I checked it out from the library, so I don't have a copy of it, but it was definitely a favorite, and I need to read more Elizabeth Acevedo. I have Clap When You Land, but I haven't gotten to it yet because it's all my books. Another Kayla book. This is Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney C. Stevens. I loved this for how real it was. I just genuinely feel like this is a great depiction of what it's like to find yourself as a teenager. It's about this girl who lives in this small town. She has this group of friends, and she doesn't know which one of them she likes, basically, and it's amazing. And then in this small town, they have this tradition where every year someone gets awarded a corn dolly, and it's this huge honor, and she has been nominated, but most of her town doesn't believe she deserves it because she's like this tomboy, and she doesn't really depict the elements that a corn dolly person should have. And it was so good, and like I loved it so much because it was just raw and it was real, and I just loved every moment of it. I just, oh my god, I don't even know how to describe it. I need to reread it. I'm not describing it well. I've talked about it in previous videos, but I remember just being totally sucked in by the world and by the writing and just really believing it. Like I believed this girl's struggle so much, and like her identity and the things that she was dealing with. I just loved it a lot, loved it a lot. Basically, it's just Kayla books over and over in the books I read for that video. But next up, we have Dig by A.S. King. Oh, it's weird. It's so weird because it's like, what the hell is this book trying to do? It's about this cast of characters that are seemingly completely disconnected, and then you're finding their connections through potatoes. And I loved it so much. Like, it's so fucking weird. But the ending just killed me. It's like, I read it so quickly because it's such a good read, and I need to pick up more A.S. King, like now, because it was perfect in ways that I didn't think it could be. Like, I am not describing this well. I feel like you can't describe this book in a lot of ways because it's just, it was so good. It was so good. And last up, my favorite book of the year, and the book that I think I regret the most reading on audio, because I don't have a copy of it, is King and the Dragonflies by Katherine House. Holy fuck. Like, this is a middle grade. And it hurt me because it was so beautiful. I had started Felix Ever After by Katherine House this year too, but I couldn't get into it on ebook, so I think I'm gonna check it out from the library. But back to King with Dragonflies. It's about King. He's a young black boy whose brother has recently died, so he's grieving his brother, but he believes his brother has turned into a dragonfly. So every day after school, he goes to the swamp to visit his brother. He has this friend who is not treated well by his family and by his father. He came out to King, and when King told his brother told him, you need to stop hanging out with him because you can't, you know, be black and also be gay, or have gay friends. And it is so powerful and so beautiful, and just, oh my god, I want to reread it again. I need it. I need to have a copy of it. So many books that I should have bought copies of before I stopped allowing myself to buy books, but it's just beautiful. It's just a truly beautiful book. I think people of all ages could get something out of it, and I will recommend it to every single person ever, because it's just honestly my favorite book that I read this year, which was shocking because I just read it on a whim. Like, I was like, oh, whatever. Oh, cool, we have this audiobook. Let me check it out and read it. And it killed me. It killed me. I loved it. It has stuck with me all year, and it has remained my favorite book of the year the whole time. So, and it was a middle grade. Like, what? I don't read much middle grade. I actually read a lot more this year, gonna be honest, but it was beautiful, and it was so much more than I thought it was gonna be. So, pick it up, please. Those are the top 10 books that I read this year. I am very lucky that it was so hard to choose, because I read some incredible books, like books that will stick with me for a very long time, books that will probably be considered favorites for years to come. I'm obsessed with a lot of these books, so I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful that I had a good reading year. But comment down below your favorite book that you read this year. Thank you so much for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, all the normal stuff, and I'll see you really, really soon. Bye.